All right, so with this one, we have the weekly payrolls for the two imaginary restaurants, Moose Burgers and McTofu. And no, I did not name them. Not that creative. But what you're going to do is you're going to create two separate lists. So you can go ahead if you want and just type them all in while you're there. Do like the Moose Burgers in like L1 and then do McTofu in L2. And then you're going to run the one variable stats for both of them individually. So if you do one set in L1 and one set in L2, you're just going to have to change the L1 to L2 when you go to do your one variable stats. So however you want to do it is fine. But once y'all get all of that, then you can tell me what to type in for the 5-number summaries. And two other things that I also want you to make note of, write down, whatever, when you do it, is the X bar, which is just the mean value. And then this won't be written on there explicitly, but I also want your IQR just to help us with the next ones. To clear the whole list. When you hit the stat or whatever, instead of hitting edit, there's a clear list option. And if you hit that and then you hit second stat, it brings up the lists. I can't remember exactly what the button is, but it brings up your list options and you can just hit L1 and it'll clear L1. Or you can manually delete them all, but there's a lot of numbers in there, so. Clear list, and then that brings up the list. Okay, I was trying to remember. I was like,
sit there and think about it for a second.
I'm like, because I think if you look, the word right above stat, I think actually says list. So, and then stat, and then you should see a list of all your lists, and then you just select which one you wanna.
I have Moose Burgers.
All right, what do we have for Moose Burgers?
The min is 110. The Q1 is 123. The median is 133.5. Q3 is 144, and max is 160.
And then what is the X bar value on there? It's the mean.
134.4.
And then your IQR is going to be 21 based on that.
For McTofu. Okay, the min is 100. The Q1 is 110. The median is 120. Q3 is 132. Max is 360. The mean is 142.4.
And then the IQR would be 22. All right, so we're going to use all of that to create parallel box plots here. So what I would do is just draw all the way across like your, it's not going to do it straight for me on this thing. Okay. I would do increments of 50 starting at 100 and then go out to like 400 because we have this 360 value here, which if we do the math is going to be an outlier because 360, if you actually look at all the numbers, like it's not even relatively close. So we could do the math and run it if you actually wanted to, but we're going to treat that as what's it called? An outlier. So, like I said, I would just do increments of 50. So we're doing parallel ones. So I'm going to write restaurants over here. And then I'm going to do like blue and red. So I'm going to do Moose Burger in blue. And then I'll do McTofu in red. And then I just want to create my box plots for each of them individually. So you can just draw that from the stats that you found in your 5-number summary there. For McTofu, since your max is going to be an outlier, I would just say find the next number that's like the next smallest number, or the next largest number, I guess technically is what I would say. So that would be that 146, I think. And then and if you wanted to do what we did, I think it was yesterday when we graphed one, where you actually made your, like, this main part of your graph a little bit bigger, and then you did, like, the little squiggly line thing, and then did it, that would also be okay. But either way is fine. And I should label this bottom part as salary in dollars since it's talking about payroll. Right here. So I just, because we could have done the math to see that 360 was definitely an outlier, but it's looking at it, and I mean, it's like, it's over 200 more than the rest of them, so you can just say it's going to be an outlier. So what I did is, because we had this data given to us, I went up here and I said, okay, I found the next number that's like the largest of the rest of the numbers. So I got rid of 360 and I said, okay, the next biggest number is 146. So I used that. The difference in this one and what we've been doing is when we've said that the max is an outlier in the last couple, we haven't had all this data. We've only had the 5-number summary. And so we took the 5-number summary before, and we just said, okay, well, our max is going to be wherever our fence is. But now we can get a new max because we're given these values. So when you're given the data, you want to use the max that's the closest to the fence, like the closest number inside, or the biggest number that's inside your fences is how I should say it. Words are not working for me today. You should have heard me try to explain a problem in Algebra 1 today. Something that should not have been difficult, I just could not. Words were not working. So if you find your fences, okay, it's possible. I mean, all of these should be within it because they're all in such a close little area. But if you got to the point where you had your fences and there's another number outside of it, then you're still going to just use the number that's the closest inside, that's the biggest, for your max when you have the data given to you. When you just have the 5-number summary given to you, you just use the upper fence value for your max because you don't know what the next closest number would be in there. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so then number 3 says to write a few sentences comparing the distributions. So what I would do is I would talk about the things like individually about them. So like I would talk about Mooseburger, then I would talk about McTofu, and then I would say anything that they kind of both seem to have in common. So what do we kind of notice about Mooseburger? Yeah, it's mostly symmetric. With what we have, we can say that it should be. And then I would say talk about on average what is the salary for Mooseburger. Yeah. So I would say the median and the mean in this case were pretty similar. So since it was 133.5 and 134.4, I would say just split it and just call it 134. So approximately $134. But either of those numbers would be okay in this situation. Since it's pretty symmetric, we can go off the mean. But they're really close to each other, so we can just kind of take the average of the two of those in this case. Either way is fine. Then for McTofu, what would you notice about this one?
It is not symmetric. Well, technically though, because it's an outlier.
So when we have an outlier, we want to ignore that when we're looking at data. We're going to comment that it exists, but we want to ignore it. So if you just saw, it's going to be.
Still skewed to the right though.
It's probably still skewed a little bit. You could say slightly skewed right. It's semi-symmetric. I mean, it's, my drawing's not perfect, but there's probably a little bit more. There is a little bit more on the right side than there is on the left side, so we can say slightly skewed right.
It has an outlier.
Okay, we say it's like is uniform. Possibly.
We technically don't know that because we don't have a histogram. Now, probably it is, but since we don't actually have the histogram drawn, we don't need to comment about that part. I would just say if it's like symmetric or skewed, because we can tell that from these graphs in particular. Let's see, we said there's an outlier of $360, and then what is the average salary?
142.5.
So we would want to say something like that. This one, because we're saying that's a little bit skewed. I mean, the median is 120. So actually, if we're going to say that it's skewed, we probably want to go more with the median. Because the median is resistant to the skew. The problem with your mean, unless you rerun your numbers, the problem with your mean is that it's accounting for this outlier.
Okay.
So we would want to look at, Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, if there wasn't an outlier, well, one, it would probably be a little bit more symmetric if there wasn't an outlier, but we could use the mean. Like in the first one, you technically could have gone with the mean or the median because they were pretty much identical. Because if you rounded either of them, they would have rounded to 134. So that's why I just called it 134. Now, what do you notice about the IQRs of the two of them?
They're almost the same.
Okay, so both restaurants. So I would comment about that. So I would say both restaurants have approximately the same IQR. If you just look at the salaries of Mooseburger versus McTofu, what do you notice about their salaries? Ignoring the outlier one.
They're all relatively the same. Or like close to each other.
Comparatively, one restaurant to the other, though. Look at your median for both. And what do you notice?
Oh, they're like the same as the average.
Well, look at the medians just compared to each other and ignore everything else. Is one of them bigger than the other one, smaller,
Yeah,
same?
Mooseburger's bigger than.
So from that, we could draw the conclusion that generally the salaries at McTofu are lower than at Mooseburger.
Mooseburger is the answer to the next question.
Yes, my paper has something else, but I don't know why. All right, so yes, it would be Mooseburger. Now, when it says average, I think the reason I have McTofu on my paper is because if you just look at the mean values, McTofu is larger, but you should be looking at their medians because of the one being skewed, so it's going to be Mooseburger. Why is the mean salary misleading?
Because there's an outlier.
Yeah. So for McTofu, it has an outlier which greatly raised the value of the mean. If you wanted to go to your list and clear that, you don't have to, but if you wanted to go to your list and clear the $360 salary out, you would probably find that it's almost identical to Mooseburger, or at least relatively similar. And that would help you to see too that it's really big. Sometimes it will tell you, like the problems will say remove the outlier and then like proceed, depending if there is one. So, at which restaurant would you rather work? Give a sound statistical justification for your decision.
Mooseburger, because the only reason why I make tofu's is higher is because Sally got paid way more than everyone else.
And if you look at the minimum value, what do you notice about Mooseburger versus?
It's higher.
So that would indicate to you that the starting salary is higher at Mooseburger than it is at McTofu. So I would say Mooseburger. because it has a higher starting salary. And if you ignore the outlier, it has a higher max salary as well as a higher average. So even if you look at the max comparatively to each other, the max of Moose Burger is going to be higher than the max of McTofu. Any questions about those ones? Cool. Then stop this.